This biology tutorial is going to go through the nutrients that we need in our diet and what we call food groups, and it is suitable for Key Stage 3 or those that are in years 7 and 8. So by the end of this tutorial you should be able to describe the components of what makes up a healthy diet for our bodies. You can also compare the nutritional content of different foods, and you should be able to describe the effect of deficiencies or an excess of certain nutrients on a person's health. Now, we've been told many times that sweets are bad for us. But why? Now, we know that they're full of sugar, but isn't sugar a form of energy? Well, we're going to have a look at that. And we're also told that we must eat a balanced diet. But what exactly does this mean? Here is a list of the nutrients or the food groups we come across in science. Now, this is not to be confused with cooking, where a food group is often the term used to describe similar foods such as dairy. This looks at the 7 molecules that make up the human diet, and hence the biological food groups. We've got here carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, vitamins, minerals, water, and dietary fibre. Let's have a look at each in turn. Now, before we launch into the details of each of them, what exactly is a balanced diet? Well, it includes foods, and that's a collection of foods that contain all 7 of the different food groups we've just mentioned. Eating all 7 in the correct proportion is also important. It's no good eating lots and lots of protein if you're not getting any vitamins and minerals, for instance. Too little or too much of any one of the food groups can lead to a deficiency, or, if it's far too much, becoming obese. So another example, if you don't eat fruit or vegetables, that can lead to deficiency diseases such as scurvy or rickets. Eating far too much carbohydrates or lipids can lead to obesity. You have to get the balance of the nutrients right. So now we know what a balanced diet is, we can look at each in turn. Here we have a table of the 7 nutrients or food groups. So get yourself a pen and paper if you haven't already got one, and copy out this table. As soon as you've done that, press the spacebar to continue to the next slide. Let's have a look at our first food group, carbohydrates. There are 2 types of carbohydrates. You'll see on your table you've got simple carbohydrates and complex carbohydrates. Now, if you think about sweets, they've got sugar in them, and that is a very simple carbohydrate. It doesn't need to be broken down by the body, so it's a very, very instant form of energy. A complex carbohydrate does need breaking down, so the energy from a starch, for instance, will be released very, very slowly. Now, underneath your table, have a go at writing for yourself what you think is meant by a nutrient, and then what you think the function of the carbohydrate is. Let's have a look at your table. First of all, look at the carbohydrates. It's now been filled in. The carbohydrates are there for energy. It's the only purpose it has. We take in carbohydrate to provide our bodies with the energy it needs, nothing else. And examples of simple carbohydrates are sweet and white bread. White rice is another. And the complex carbohydrates, the ones that keep us full for longer because it takes such a long time to break them down, are things like wholemeal bread and cereals, wholemeal pasta, that sort of thing. Once you've written those down in your table, press the spacebar to move on to the next slide. Lipids. Well, they're often called fats, but you have to be careful here from a science point of view. Lipids is the umbrella term. Fats are lipids in their solid form, and oils are the lipids in their liquid form. You will see these in your cupboards at home. So fats you've probably seen as butter or margarine that you spread on your bread. Oils are probably something that you cook with or that you pour on your salad, such as extra virgin olive oil. So they have three functions. They provide us with some energy. They also keep us warm by providing a small layer of insulation under our skin. And their other, more important function is to protect our organs. And they actually form a layer around things like the kidneys and the heart, and sometimes even the liver and the pancreas. And they stop it being damaged when we move about. Now let's put that information into your table. So you've got solid lipids, which we know as fats, and liquid lipids, which we know as oils. They both have the same function, remember, and that's three functions, but they provide energy, insulation, and protection of organs. And some examples are butter and olive oil. Once you've written those down, press the spacebar to move on. Proteins. These are extremely important to repair our body tissue. And, as a child, they're extremely important for your growth. Your muscles and organs need them to be able to function properly, because if they get slightly damaged in some way, they need a process in which to repair, and proteins provide that process. So on your piece of paper, complete the table first of all with proteins. So you've got there the function is growth and repair. And you've got some examples. Any forms of meats, that's fish, chicken, pork, any of those, eggs, and any other dairy product, and nuts, and other seeds. They're all good sources of protein. Now you also may have noticed there was a question on the previous slide, and it said state the function of proteins. So underneath your table now, write down what you think the function of proteins is in our diet. When you're ready, press the spacebar to move on. Vitamins and minerals. These are two food groups, but they're usually grouped together. Certainly at this stage you don't need to know their exact function because it's quite complex, and if you are really interested and go on to study at A-level and university, you'll certainly have a look at each individual molecule. But essentially we take them in to help with keeping our body nice and healthy. You might know the function of certain vitamins. So for instance, vitamin A is very good for our eyesight. The eyes need it desperately. Vitamin D is very good for depositing calcium into our teeth and bones to keep them nice and strong. And this is where rickets comes from. So if you lack vitamin D as you are growing up, then your bones become soft because you're not getting enough of the calcium, and they can bend, and that's what rickets is. Iron is another good mineral, and that is extremely important for transporting oxygen around in your red blood cells. Vitamin C is also a good one for your skin, and if you lack vitamin C in your diet, you'll have something called scurvy, and in very extreme cases it can actually affect your gums so badly that your teeth can end up falling out. And sailors had this problem when they used to do voyages across the oceans, because they had no access to fruit and vegetables on their journey, and a lot of the sailors often came down with scurvy because of this. So now, at the bottom of your piece of paper, you'll see the question there. State why the body needs calcium and iron. Write your answer, and then when you're ready, press the spacebar to move on. Now let's go back to your table and fill in vitamins and minerals. All you need to know at this stage is they keep your body healthy. Now you'll also notice that you don't need loads and loads of them. Carbohydrates is something that you need quite a lot of. The same with proteins and lipids. But vitamins and minerals are what knows they are needed in such tiny amounts, they're called trace elements. And you will find them in things like milk, vegetables and fruit. When you've written that in your table, press the spacebar to move on. Water. Now this is actually a very simple molecule and is often overlooked as a nutrient. But it makes up the vast majority of your body, because without it, chemical reactions wouldn't be able to happen in all of your cells. Without chemical reactions, we actually couldn't live. So it's important that we keep hydrated through lots of fluid. And that fluid can be in any form. So you can drink tea, coffee, all sorts of fruit juices, squash, smoothies. Anything with a liquid content will have water in it, and that's what you need for your diet. Now, we need quite a bit of it because we obviously lose water through tears, sweat, when we go to the toilet through urine and feces, and when we are actually breathing in and out. We breathe it in. If you actually hold a mirror in front of your mouth and breathe out on it, you'll notice you'll get condensation. What you are breathing out is water vapor, so you are losing water. So you need to drink lots of it to replenish it in your diet. So in your table now, fill in the bit for water. Its function is to keep your body hydrated so that chemical reactions can happen. Some examples are tea, fruit juice and water. If you've got your own favourite drink, pop it in there as well. When you've written it in, press the spacebar to continue. The final food group is something called dietary fibre. Fibre is the part of a plant, and this is very important. It's plant fibre, not animal fibre. Now, our body can't actually break it down, but we don't need to. What it acts as, though, is something that helps the food move through the gut nice and smoothly. Plant fibre is nice and soft. Animal fibre is extremely hard. And we'll come on to that in a couple of slides' time. So just remember, fibre is the part of plants that the body can't break down, and that's what we need, which is why you're always told as a child to eat your greens. So as the fibre moves through the gut, waste is pushed out of the body more easily, so it prevents any constipation and other intestine complications later on in life. So the final one to fill in on your table is fibre. It keeps your gut nice and healthy. Some examples of where you find dietary fibre is in anything green. You'll also find it in whole grain cereal, any beans or other pulses such as peas and lentils, and things like tomatoes, which you might find a little strange, but it's the skins of the tomatoes. When you've written all of that down, press the spacebar to continue. We have some questions here. You've got your table, so have a look now to see if you can match the nutrient to its role in the body. You can either do it in your head or you can write them down and then join the lines up. When you've finished the question, press the spacebar to continue. So, remember what I said about plant fibre and animal fibre? Well, what is so bad about junk food? Well, the problem here is it lacks a lot of the nutrition we need, and this can lead to some quite awful deficiencies. And of course, what junk food does contain is far too much of just two food groups. If you hadn't already have guessed, these food groups are lipids and carbohydrates. So prolonged eating of junk food leads to a lack of plant fibre. What you're taking in is animal fibre. So without this, you'll end up with gut problems, and a complication, it can be irritable bowel syndrome later on, and other even worse conditions than that. But the first symptom is usually constipation. So why does junk food taste so good? Well, first of all, the lack of nutrients leads to a lack of taste in its food. What they're basically doing is they are taking most of the junk of the animal fibre, such as the bits of gristle, etc., in, for instance, a chicken. And of course that doesn't taste of much. So what they do is they add in extra sugar and salt, and it tastes loads better. And then they'll perhaps put a nice fancy coating on it. Now, by adding extra sugar in there, you're adding an excess of carbohydrates. We know that carbohydrates only have one function, energy. So if you're not using that energy straight away, it's got to be stored somewhere. So hence you start putting on weight. The other thing it does is it adds salt to make it taste nice, and the extra salt in your diet upsets something called your mineral balance. So you know these vitamins and minerals we're supposed to be eating. Well, if you eat too much salt and take in too much of that particular mineral, it upsets the whole balance. And what your body tries to do is put it right. But by doing that, it can lead to high blood pressure. And the complications of that later on are kidney problems and heart disease. So, why don't we want to eat junk food very often? It can lead to some serious health problems down the line, not to mention putting on unnecessary weight. Right, back to our nutrition. Have a look at the 3 questions here and write down the answers on your piece of paper. See if you can describe, first of all, the role of lipids in the body. If you're unsure, look back at your table. Then see if you can suggest and explain the advice a doctor might give to a patient who is suffering with constipation. And in this last question, explain in detail what is meant by a balanced diet. Try to write, first of all, your definition of a balanced diet, and then describe each nutrient in turn and what its role is in our diet. When you've written the questions down and written the answer, press the spacebar to continue. How did you do? Check all of your answers on your piece of paper to those answers on this slide. A, B, C and D were the questions that were asked on previous slides, so if you didn't get a chance to write the answers down as they came up, just flick back down now and have a look at what the questions were. Did you get all of the 6 food groups right with their function? That was question 1. Question 2, 3 and 4 were on the previous slide. Check your notes now. Don't worry if you got something wrong or you don't understand something. Just go back through this tutorial and have a look again. The last question has a lot of detail in it, so don't worry if you didn't get it all down. Have a look at each sentence individually and see if it matches up with your table. Once you've done that, have another go at writing out your answer with 6 clear sentences. Once you've finished, what you can do for extra practice is go onto the Educake website and have a look for some questions on food groups and nutrients.